My name is Evan Reed. If you'd asked me 6 months ago, I would have told you my life was damn near perfect. I had a beautiful wife, a home that looked out over Lake Union, and a job that paid enough to afford the kind of quiet, comfortable life we both claimed to want. Lauren Bennett, or Lauren Reed, technically, though she kept her maiden name professionally, was the kind of woman people naturally gravitated toward. She had this bright, sparkling energy about her, like she carried some secret you wanted to be let in on. When she laughed, people around her couldn't help but smile. I used to count myself lucky to be the guy she picked. That's the funny thing about luck. You never realize when it's about to run out. It was an ordinary Thursday when the first real crack showed itself. I'd gotten off work early, just one of those rare afternoons in Seattle where the rain held off and the sun managed to punch through the clouds. It felt wasteful to just head home and sit around, so I figured I'd surprise Lauren. She loved the small things, or so she'd always said. A coffee from her favorite place, a short walk by the water together before she went back to work, simple stuff. That was us. Or at least, I thought it was. When I texted her to check if she was free, she said she was stuck at a boring lunch meeting with clients downtown. No hint of anything strange. A smiley face emoji even. I remember smiling at my phone like an idiot, thinking how lucky I was to have someone who still sent me things like that after all these years. I was about to turn my car toward the house when I thought, hell, I'm already downtown. Maybe I'll just swing by, say hi, give her the coffee, and duck out before her meeting really kicks off. Just a sweet, stupid little gesture. That was the plan. I wasn't 2 blocks from the waterfront when I saw her. The cafe wasn't one we normally went to, but Lauren was easy to spot. She was wearing the deep green coat I bought her for Christmas last year, the one that made her eyes pop like emeralds. She was sitting at a small table by the window, laughing at something a man across from her had said. Not just laughing politely, laughing with her whole body, the way she used to laugh when we stayed up too late swapping stories on the floor of our first apartment. I froze on the sidewalk, just watching. At first, I told myself it was fine. Maybe this was the client lunch she mentioned. Maybe it was all innocent. But the way they leaned toward each other across the small table, heads almost touching, hands moving in those unconscious little ways people do when they're completely absorbed in someone, it didn't look like a business meeting. And then there was the way she touched his wrist. Light. Familiar. Like she was tracing the air between them. I don't know how long I stood there, half hidden behind a lamppost like some creep, but eventually, Lauren glanced up. Her smile faltered the second she saw me. For a heartbeat, she looked almost guilty, and then she plastered on this too bright grin and gave a little wave, like I was some casual acquaintance she'd bumped into on vacation. I didn't wave back. I stood there like an idiot until she turned her attention back to the guy, her shoulders tightening, her hands folding neatly in her lap. I didn't know who he was then, not yet, but the image was burned into my brain. I could have drawn it for you from memory, the soft light from the cafe windows, the way she leaned in, the way her smile shifted when she saw me. I drove home without delivering the coffee. The cup sat there in my passenger seat the whole ride, growing colder and heavier with every block I passed. By the time I pulled into our driveway, it felt like a lead weight on my chest. When Lauren got home that evening, she acted like nothing had happened. Kissed me on the cheek, dropped her purse by the door, kicked off her heels, and started telling me about her exhausting lunch meeting. I waited until she was pouring a glass of wine to bring it up. I saw you today, I said, keeping my voice casual. Too casual, maybe. She glanced over her shoulder, wine bottle hovering in the air. Saw me where? Downtown. At that cafe on Pike. You said you were in a meeting? There was a pause. A flicker of something in her eyes. Then a laugh, quick, almost musical, but just a little too forced. Oh, Evan. That wasn't a real meeting, she said, waving me off like it was no big deal. Troy's just helping me with some gallery project stuff. We were brainstorming. You know how those things go. Troy. The name slid out of her mouth so naturally, like it wasn't the first time she'd said it. I didn't recognize it, but I filed it away immediately. Looked pretty intense, I said, trying to sound lighthearted, like it didn't feel like my guts were twisting into knots. She rolled her eyes, smiling indulgently like I was being ridiculous. "You're paranoid," she said, crossing the room to kiss me again, wine glass in one hand. "Seriously, Evan. You have nothing to worry about." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly that it almost hurt. I told myself that I was overreacting. That I was being insecure. That marriages had dry spells, busy schedules, weird little misunderstandings, and this was just one of those things. Nothing to see here. Move along. But something inside me, something small and cold and razor-sharp, dug in that night and refused to let go. No matter how many times I told myself I was imagining it, no matter how many smiles she gave me or how many reassurances she offered, a voice inside me kept whispering the truth I didn't want to hear. Something was wrong. And for the first time since I'd met Lauren Bennett, I wasn't sure she was telling me the whole story. After that afternoon, I tried to let it go. I really did. But something inside me, that cold little splinter of doubt, refused to stop digging. It didn't matter how many smiles Lauren gave me, how many casual kisses she brushed against my cheek, how many little reassurances she threw into conversation like life preservers. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. And I couldn't unknow what I now knew deep down in my gut. At first, it was small things. Things that, on their own, could have been explained away. She started working later. Not unusual, Lauren had always been a workaholic, driven in a way that I admired. But suddenly late nights at the gallery weren't just an occasional thing. They were constant. 3, sometimes 4 nights a week, she wouldn't get home until after 10. She'd kick off her heels at the door, toss me a tired smile, and say she was swamped or that Troy needed last-minute help with the new exhibits. The name slipped into conversation more often, casual as anything. Troy said this, Troy thought that. Troy liked sushi, Troy hated jazz. At first, it was harmless details, the kind of filler you share about your coworkers. But after a while, I started noticing that Troy's name came up more than anyone else's. Almost like she couldn't help herself. Like her mind wandered there when she wasn't even paying attention. Then came the perfumes. At first, I didn't notice. I mean, Lauren had always worn perfume, but it was usually soft, the kind of scent you didn't catch unless you were standing real close. Now it hit me when she walked through the door. Heavier, sharper, expensive scents I didn't recognize. Not anything I'd ever bought for her. I made some dumb comment about it once, joking that she must have robbed a department store, and she laughed it off, said something vague about trying new samples from a client. That was Lauren's gift, always just enough truth woven into the lie to make you doubt your own instincts. The changes kept piling up. Little things. She started putting her phone on silent at night, flipping it face down when we sat on the couch. If I walked into the room while she was on a call, she'd end the conversation quickly with a soft, almost guilty laugh. "Just work stuff," she'd say. "You don't want to hear about the boring details." And maybe I didn't. But I still hated the way she said it, like she was pushing me out of a world I used to be part of. The final straw was the password. One Saturday morning, while she was in the shower, I grabbed her laptop off the counter. I'd been trying to remember the name of a restaurant we went to once, years ago, and I thought maybe she'd bookmarked it. But when I opened the screen, a password prompt stared back at me. That was new. We'd never hidden our passwords from each other before. There'd never been a reason to. I knew hers, she knew mine. It wasn't even something we talked about, it was just a given. And now, suddenly, she needed to lock me out of her computer? I told myself not to make a big deal out of it. Told myself it was probably because she was working on some confidential project. Something to do with the gallery, or maybe a surprise for me. I clung to those excuses like a man clinging to a sinking life raft. But even as I told myself those things, I felt the last pieces of trust starting to slip through my fingers. Arguments started creeping into our conversations, small at first, sharp little barbs hidden under jokes and offhand comments. If I asked too many questions about her schedule, she'd snap that I didn't trust her. If I mentioned missing her, she'd say I was being clingy or insecure. "You always make me feel like I'm doing something wrong," she said once, tossing her coat onto the back of a chair, her face tight with frustration. "Why can't you just support me?" I wanted to scream that I had supported her. For years. Through every late night, every big dream she chased. I'd been her biggest cheerleader. Her safe place. And now she was making me feel like the enemy. It was like living with a stranger who had my wife's face. I started remembering things I hadn't paid attention to before. The times she suddenly got emergency calls in the middle of dinner. The vague explanations about trips to neighboring cities for gallery networking events I was never invited to. The weekends when she claimed she was visiting her sister, but never once posted a picture, never mentioned anything specific when she got home. At first, I chalked it up to us being busy, growing older, having our own lives. But once the doubts took root, it all started lining up too neatly. I told myself I was being paranoid. That if I accused her of something without proof, I'd be the bad guy. I pictured the fights we'd have, the way she'd look at me with disappointment and say she couldn't believe I didn't trust her. The way she'd probably cry and make me feel like the world's biggest jerk. So I kept my mouth shut. Pretended everything was fine. Played the part of the supportive husband while the unease gnawed at me from the inside out. But pretending didn't stop the late nights. It didn't stop the smell of foreign cologne sometimes clinging to her clothes, not hers, not mine. It didn't stop the cold, distant way she touched me, like a habit she was trying to shake rather than something she wanted. I knew I should confront her. I knew it couldn't go on like this. But fear kept me frozen. Fear that once I said it out loud, once I pulled the thread, the whole thing would unravel completely. Because deep down, in the part of me I didn't want to admit existed, I already knew the truth. Lauren was slipping away from me. And I was powerless to stop it. For a while, I lived in that no man's land between certainty and denial. It's a miserable place to exist. You tell yourself you're imagining things. You tell yourself she loves you, that you're overreacting, that relationships go through rough patches. You tell yourself anything to keep from facing the truth that's standing right in front of you, practically begging to be acknowledged. But life has a way of yanking you out of your own delusions, whether you're ready or not. It was a Saturday when the final nail got hammered into the coffin. Jared and I had made loose plans to grab lunch, something we hadn't done in months. He was one of the few friends who hadn't drifted away as Lauren and I became increasingly wrapped up in our own world. I think he saw the warning signs long before I did, but he'd kept quiet, probably out of loyalty or maybe pity. We met at a little burger place near Gas Works Park, the kind of spot we used to hit up in college when we were too broke to afford anything better. It was almost comforting, at first, the smell of greasy fries, the battered tables, the sun cutting through the dirty windows. For an hour, we just talked about old times, sports, work. Nothing heavy. I almost convinced myself that today would be normal. But then Jared leaned back in his chair, wiped his hands on a napkin, and said, real casual like, "Hey, man. Wasn't Lauren supposed to be tied up with some charity auction stuff last night?" I blinked, thrown by the sudden turn. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Fundraiser meeting." "Why?" He hesitated, which immediately set off alarm bells in my head. Jared wasn't the type to dance around things. If he had something to say, he usually just said it. That pause, that tiny crack of hesitation, told me everything before he even opened his mouth again. "It's just. I was out in Bellevue last night, grabbing dinner with Mel. And we stayed at that spa hotel afterward, you know, the fancy one by the river." I nodded, my heart already sinking. "And, we saw Lauren there." He said it carefully, watching me like he was waiting for me to explode. But I didn't. I just sat there, numb. "She wasn't alone," he added after a second. "She was with some younger guy. Shorter haircut. Kind of artsy looking. They were at the bar first. Later, Mel swore she saw them checking into a room together. The world narrowed down to a pinpoint. I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my voice even. You sure it was her? He gave me a sad, almost apologetic look. Yeah, man. I'm sure. I nodded like he just told me something minor, like the weather forecast was bad for the weekend. Inside, though, something cracked open, wide and permanent. When I got home, I didn't even take my shoes off. I went straight for my laptop and pulled up our bank account. Lauren and I had always shared finances, another relic from the days when trust wasn't a question. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. 2 charges from the spa hotel, 1 for the bar, 1 for a room. Both from the night before. And not long before that, a charge from a high-end Italian place in Bellevue that we'd never been to together. Every piece of it slotted into place too easily, like a puzzle I hadn't realized I'd already almost finished. The late nights, the work trips, the silence, the passwords, the distance. All of it. The picture I had tried so hard not to see was right there in front of me now, undeniable. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the transaction history, my hands trembling on the keyboard. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. Time stopped meaning anything. I thought I would feel rage. The kind of blinding fury you see in movies, where the guy flips tables and punches walls and screams until his throat is raw. But what I felt was worse. I felt hollow. Like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left nothing but a thin shell. Eventually, I closed the laptop and just sat there in the darkening room, listening to the house creak and settle around me. Our house. The one we'd picked out together, painted together, fought over curtains and appliances and tiles together. A house that was supposed to be a home, but now felt more like a stage set, all props and lighting and no real substance. I replayed every moment in my mind with brutal clarity, the afternoon at the cafe, the forced smiles, the perfume, the way she'd laughed off my concerns. How carefully she must have lied, how much effort she must have spent weaving this whole second life behind my back. I thought about how easy it had been for her. That hurt most of all. When Lauren came home that night, she was carrying Thai takeout and humming under her breath, like it was any other evening. She dropped the bag on the counter and smiled at me, that same dazzling smile that used to make my heart race. "Hey, babe," she said. "I got your favorite." I stared at her for a long moment, wondering how someone could stand there so casually, knowing what she had done. Wondering how I ever thought I knew her at all. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Something inside me had gone still, quiet, cold. There was no point in blowing up, no point in accusations or screaming matches. She'd already made her choice. She just didn't know that I knew yet. And maybe, just maybe, that gave me an advantage. Because if Lauren thought she could lie her way through this one more time, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. After that night, I stopped pretending. At least, inside my own head. Outwardly, I played the part of the clueless husband because I needed time to figure out how to handle the wreckage she didn't even know I'd uncovered. I wasn't interested in fighting. I wasn't interested in begging her to choose me, or groveling for scraps of whatever was left of our marriage. No. If Lauren had decided to turn our life into a performance, then it was only fair that the curtain come down in a way she'd never forget. Revenge isn't something that comes naturally to me. I'm not built that way. But betrayal changes a person. It burns out parts of you that used to be soft and forgiving and replaces them with something harder. Colder. More patient. If I was going to burn this false world down, I was going to do it carefully. Publicly. At the center of everything she cared about. Lauren had spent years curating this picture-perfect life. Social events, charity boards, museum fundraisers, she loved the way people looked at her, admired her. She thrived on it. Her image wasn't just important to her, it was everything. The thought hit me while she was chatting with someone on the phone, smiling and twirling a piece of her hair around her finger like a teenager. She was standing by the kitchen window, golden sunlight streaming around her like some carefully orchestrated Instagram post. The museum's annual charity gala was coming up. It was the highlight of Lauren's year, the night she got to strut in front of Seattle's art elite, flashing her 1,000-watt smile and basking in everyone's admiration. It was perfect. I wasn't going to scream at her in private or tear apart our living room in some cliché explosion of rage. No. I was going to let her bury herself with her own lies, and then, right when she thought she was untouchable, I was going to shatter that illusion in front of everyone she cared about impressing. I couldn't do it alone, though. That's where Mia Carson came in. Mia and I had been friends long before Lauren came into the picture. We met in college, bonded over late-night study sessions and mutual sarcasm. When Lauren and I got serious, Mia was supportive but wary. She saw through people faster than anyone I knew, and she'd never been fully sold on Lauren's polished charm. There was a sharpness to Mia that made people underestimate her, a mistake I knew Lauren had made too. I hadn't talked to Mia much lately, not since the early years of my marriage when Lauren subtly, methodically pushed my old friends to the edges of my life. But when I texted her, just a simple, "Can we talk?" she replied almost immediately. We met at a dive bar a few neighborhoods away, a place so different from Lauren's world it felt almost refreshing. I didn't even have to explain everything. One look at my face, and Mia just sighed and said, "It's about Lauren, isn't it?" I told her everything over 2 beers and a basket of cold fries. The cafe. The late nights. The new passwords. The hotel in Bellevue. Jared's story. The bank records. She didn't interrupt. Didn't try to sugarcoat anything. When I finished, she sat back in her chair, crossed her arms, and said, "What do you want to do about it?" I could have said I didn't know. But I did. I wanted Lauren to lose the thing she valued most, her image. Her status. The admiration she craved like oxygen. And I needed Mia's help to make it happen. We spent the next 2 weeks planning it out like a heist. Quietly, methodically, patiently. Mia had a gift for strategy. It was part of what made her so damn good at her job in PR. She knew exactly how to leak information, how to frame a story so it didn't look like an attack but an unavoidable unveiling of the truth. First, we compiled the evidence. Jared's account. The hotel receipts. Texts Lauren had left open once on her tablet by accident. I snapped pictures before she noticed. Innocent at first glance, but with context, they painted a pretty damning picture. Photos from Jared and Mel that night in Bellevue. And most importantly, I tracked down a few more digital footprints. Emails she thought she'd deleted. Calendar entries that didn't match the stories she told me. A hotel loyalty account she'd forgotten to log out of on the desktop. Piece by piece, we built a portfolio, the full anatomy of a betrayal. Mia helped package it into something polished. Clean. Professional. Nothing petty, nothing vengeful. Just facts. Cold, hard facts, stacked in a neat little dossier that would speak for itself. The night of the gala approached faster than I expected. Lauren spent the week before flitting around like a giddy teenager, trying on dresses, getting her hair colored, debating shoe choices with her friends over wine and laughter. I watched her from a distance, feeling like a ghost in my own house. She picked a gold gown that shimmered in the light, something that hugged her body just right and made her look like she was carved out of starlight. She twirled in front of the mirror, laughing, catching my eye with a grin that used to melt me. "You'll be there, right?" she said, voice teasing. "You have to be my handsome date." I smiled. God help me, I smiled. Wouldn't miss it. Inside, something cold and bitter curled up a little tighter. Because I knew what she didn't. I knew that this night, the night she had circled in red on every calendar, the night she had obsessed over for months, would be the night her perfect little world crumbled at her feet. And the best part? She wouldn't even see it coming. The night of the gala arrived cloaked in an eerie kind of calm. It was one of those crisp Seattle evenings where the air smelled like the bay and distant rain, but the sky stayed mercifully clear. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the cuffs of my shirt with steady hands, watching a man I barely recognized stare back at me. I looked sharp, sure, dark suit, clean shave, polished shoes, but the emptiness behind my eyes gave me away. Downstairs, Lauren was bustling around, giving herself one last once-over in the full-length mirror by the door. She looked stunning, there's no denying that. The gold dress caught the light like she was some kind of goddess, every inch of her carefully curated. Hair in soft waves, makeup flawless, earrings sparkling. She gave me a wink over her shoulder. "You're going to have to keep an eye on me tonight," she teased. "Can't have anyone stealing me away." The irony almost made me laugh out loud. Instead, I smiled and offered my arm like the gentleman I had always been. She linked hers through it without hesitation, completely oblivious to the ground crumbling beneath her. The drive to the museum felt surreal. Lauren hummed along to the radio, flipping through her phone for last-minute texts from her friends and coworkers, chatting about the guest list and the photographers and the potential press coverage. She was electric, buzzing with excitement in a way I hadn't seen in years. It made me sick to realize how much of her happiness was tied up in how she appeared to others. Not us. Not me. Just the show. When we arrived, the place was already buzzing. Flashbulbs popped outside the grand entrance, couples posing in their rented tuxes and sequined gowns, greeting each other with air kisses and champagne flutes. Lauren slipped seamlessly into the crowd, her smile flashing, her laughter bubbling at just the right moments. She was in her element, queen of the evening, adored and envied all at once. I stayed by her side for a while, playing the supportive husband role one last time, nodding along to conversations about exhibitions and donations and board meetings. People flattered Lauren endlessly, complimenting her dress, her poise, her dedication. She lapped it up like it was oxygen. But I wasn't listening to any of it. I was waiting. Mia was already inside. She'd arrived early, working quietly behind the scenes, planting the evidence in the right hands, a few key donors, a couple of gossip-hungry reporters, and, most importantly, the event organizers who practically worshipped Lauren. It wasn't going to be a nuclear blast. That would have been too obvious, too easy for Lauren to spin. No, it would be a slow leak. A spreading stain she couldn't scrub clean no matter how hard she smiled. It started small. A ripple at the edge of the room. I caught the first whispers near the silent auction tables, where a pair of older women huddled close, their eyes darting toward Lauren, their voices low and urgent. Then a couple of reporters near the bar started checking their phones, their faces lighting up with the thrill of fresh scandal. Lauren didn't notice at first. She was too busy basking in the attention, too busy twirling under the chandeliers with Troy Harper, yes, Troy, who showed up in a smug navy suit, staying just close enough to Lauren all night to stir rumors without fully confirming them. I watched from a distance, feeling nothing but a cold, detached satisfaction. She had no idea the walls were closing in. No idea that the perfect little life she had built on lies was seconds away from imploding. Finally, at the peak of the evening, just as Lauren was giving a speech, thanking everyone for their generous support of the arts, holding the microphone like it was a scepter, I made my move. I walked through the crowd slowly, feeling every pair of eyes turn toward me. Not hostile. Curious. Eager. Mia met me near the stage, pressing a small sealed envelope into my hand, her expression unreadable. She didn't need to say anything. Everything was already set in motion. Lauren's voice faltered slightly when she saw me approach, but she recovered quickly, flashing a dazzling smile meant for the cameras. I didn't say a word. I didn't make a scene. I simply handed her the envelope. She frowned in confusion, taking it automatically, her fingers brushing mine for just a second. Then I turned and walked away, not rushed, not dramatic. Just done. I didn't look back as I crossed the floor. I didn't need to. Behind me, I could feel the shift, a sudden, uneasy murmur rolling through the crowd as Lauren, queen of the evening, opened the envelope. Inside was everything. Printouts of bank statements showing the hotel stays. Screenshot TS of messages she thought were deleted. Photos from that night in Bellevue, Lauren's hand wrapped around Troy's arm, their bodies far too close for innocence. It didn't matter if she tried to explain it away. In this crowd, perception was reality. Whispers turned into conversations. Conversations turned into speculation. And speculation turned into judgment. I caught glimpses of people pulling away from her as I neared the exit. Conversations abruptly cut off when she approached. Smiles turning tight, polite, the way you smile at someone when you don't want to catch whatever disease they're carrying. Lauren stood frozen at the center of it all, clutching the damning envelope, her face pale and brittle under the chandelier light. The golden gown that had made her look like royalty a few hours ago now clung to her like a costume from a tragedy. By the time I pushed through the museum's heavy front doors and stepped into the cool night air, the first flashbulbs were already starting to pop again, only this time, they weren't there to capture her triumph. They were there to record her fall. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt something real. Freedom. By morning, the story had exploded across social media and local news blogs. Prominent museum board member Lauren Bennett caught in scandal, the headlines screamed. Sponsors dropped her by noon. The museum issued a polite but firm statement accepting her resignation. Troy Harper was nowhere to be found, no texts, no calls. He vanished like a magician's trick once the spotlight burned too hot. Lauren tried to call me, once, twice, 10 times, leaving voicemails swinging between frantic apologies and bitter threats. I didn't answer. I didn't need to hear any more lies. I filed for divorce that same week. The house, the assets, they fell into my hands easily. She was too busy trying to salvage what little reputation she had left. Every packed box, every canceled joint account, every room repainted without her touch, it all felt like breathing after years underwater. A few months later, Lauren showed up at my door. She wasn't wearing gold anymore. No designer heels, no perfect hair. Just jeans and a sweatshirt, eyes hollow and tired. She asked if we could talk. I let her speak, but my heart stayed cold. Her apology came too late. I wished her well, truly, but I didn't invite her in. I had spent too long patching up the holes she left in me to let her tear them open again. Life moved forward. I picked up my camera again, lost hours wandering the parks and the waterfront, chasing sunsets instead of ghosts. Old friends I hadn't seen in years found their way back into my orbit. New dreams started quietly blooming where all the pain used to live. One evening, standing alone on the pier, I watched the sun dip into the water and finally understood I wasn't broken. I was free. And for the first time in a long, long time, the future felt like mine.